In a world overflowing with noise, where people speak before they think and express before they feel, silence becomes the rarest form of communication. Yet, silence has always been the oldest language of the human soul. It carries the weight of what the mouth refuses to utter and what the heart struggles to explain. A man's silence, especially, is often misunderstood. Many interpret it as disinterest, emotional detachment, or lack of care. But what if his silence is not emptiness, but depth? What if it is not avoidance, but a quiet attempt to protect something sacred within himself? Silence for a man can be both a shield and a confession. When he chooses not to speak, it is not always because he has nothing to say. Sometimes it is because he feels too much. Words often fail him. They are too fragile to carry the full weight of his inner world. In the stillness behind his eyes lives a complexity that even he cannot always name. This silence is his way of maintaining balance, a space where emotions can settle before they overflow. Silence teaches restraint, the discipline to feel deeply without reacting impulsively. It is the art of understanding that not every emotion requires a performance, not every wound needs to be displayed, and not every thought must be shared. Through silence, he learns patience. He learns to observe rather than defend, to listen rather than argue, to hold his peace rather than prove his point. In silence, he finds strength, not the loud kind that demands recognition, but the quiet strength that remains steady even in confusion. When a man grows silent, it is often because he is trying to understand what cannot be easily understood. He retreats not to escape but to reflect. He listens, not to the world outside, but to the movement within. This is the place where he meets his fears, his doubts, and his unspoken desires. It is in this inner chamber that truth slowly reveals itself. Words can lie, gestures can deceive, but silence has no disguise. It exposes the truth through presence alone. Silence is also where love is tested. Many relationships fail because silence is mistaken for distance. A woman might ask, "Why won't he talk to me?" without realizing that sometimes his quietness is an act of love, a way of not hurting with words that are not yet ripe with clarity. Silence gives him time to process emotion before expression, thought before reaction. It is the pause that prevents regret. If one can learn to sit beside that silence, not demanding explanation but trusting its intention, a deeper connection begins to grow, one that is rooted not in constant words but in mutual understanding. Silence can also be a mirror. When a man chooses silence, it reflects not only his inner state but also the space he feels around him. If his silence is heavy, it may mean his thoughts are crowded. If it is calm, it means he has found peace. Silence speaks in frequencies beyond hearing. It vibrates through presence, posture, and energy. When he sits quietly beside you, sometimes he is saying more than he ever could with words. There is also humility in silence. It is the recognition that truth is not owned by the loudest voice. In silence, the ego dissolves, the need to be right fades, and what remains is awareness. Through silence, he learns to listen, not just to others, but to the flow of life itself. He begins to see that wisdom often enters through the door of stillness, not speech. Silence is not weakness. It is not a lack of emotion, nor an absence of care. It is maturity, the realization that speaking too soon can break what time is still healing. Many men have been taught to suppress, to be silent out of fear of vulnerability. But true silence is not suppression, it is transformation. It is the sacred space where pain is turned into purpose, where anger dissolves into understanding, where confusion matures into clarity. To understand a man's silence, one must listen beyond sound. Look at his eyes when he says nothing. Feel his energy when words stop flowing. Notice the subtle ways he shows presence, the way he stays even when speech leaves him. This is the silence that holds truth. It is not void, it is full. It contains everything he cannot yet say, everything he wishes to protect until it finds the right moment to emerge. Silence also reveals the difference between reaction and response. In noise, one reacts. In silence, one responds. The pause between feeling and expression is where wisdom lives. Through silence, he learns not to let the storm of emotion dictate his behavior. Instead, he breathes, observes, and allows his inner weather to settle. Then, when he finally speaks, his words carry depth, intention, and peace. In this way, silence becomes his teacher. It teaches him to value truth over opinion, to seek peace over victory, to nurture calm rather than chaos. It teaches him that not everything requires an answer. Some things only require awareness. Silence shows him that understanding does not always come through dialogue, but through presence. Sometimes the most meaningful conversations happen without a single word spoken. The modern world fears silence because it confronts us with ourselves. We use noise to hide behind constant talking, endless distractions, and emotional performances. But silence strips away illusion. It leaves us face to face with what is real. And when a man allows himself to dwell there, he finds the courage to see himself without masks. This self-clarity becomes the foundation of how he loves, how he leads, how he exists. To listen to silence is to understand the invisible rhythm of life. Every pause, every breath, every unspoken moment carries a message. The truth that silence holds is not hidden. It is simply quiet, waiting for one who listens deeply enough to hear it. In a society that glorifies control, dominance, and emotional restraint, the idea of a man being vulnerable often feels like a contradiction. From childhood, he is told to be strong, to hold his tears, to carry burdens quietly, to protect rather than to be protected. But beneath that armor of strength lives a human heart, soft, uncertain, longing to be seen without the need to perform. Vulnerability, though often feared, is not weakness. It is the quiet strength that allows him to stay open in a world that constantly asks him to close. It is the courage to be real when everything around him demands perfection. A man's vulnerability is rarely visible because it hides behind his silence, his responsibilities, and his quiet endurance. He may not say when he feels lost or unsure. He may smile when he is breaking inside, simply because the world has taught him that showing emotion means losing control. Yet within that silence lies immense power. It is the power to feel without fleeing, and to stand exposed before life and still choose honesty over pretense. True strength is not measured by how much he can hide, but by how much he can face without denial. Vulnerability is the doorway to authenticity. It strips away everything false and brings him face to face with his own humanity. When a man allows himself to be vulnerable, he meets himself without the mask that society placed upon him. He begins to understand that his fears, doubts, and insecurities are not signs of failure, but signs of depth. It takes far greater courage to say, "I don't know, I'm scared," or "I'm hurt," than to pretend everything is under control. Vulnerability is the act of standing naked before truth, not in body but in spirit. Many people mistake vulnerability for fragility. But fragility breaks under pressure, while vulnerability bends and adapts. It is flexibility born of honesty. When a man is vulnerable, he becomes more capable of growth. He stops defending his pain and begins understanding it. He stops fighting his emotions and begins listening to what they are trying to teach him. Vulnerability turns pain into wisdom because it allows him to learn from what he feels instead of hiding from it. To be vulnerable is to admit that he does not have all the answers. It is to acknowledge that he too needs support, that even the strong require gentleness. This is where connection begins, not in perfection but in presence. When a man allows himself to be seen, not as a hero but as human, something shifts within those around him. His openness invites safety. It tells others, "You do not have to pretend with me." Vulnerability dissolves walls that pride builds and replaces them with bridges of understanding. But vulnerability is not loud. It doesn't announce itself through tears or confessions alone. Sometimes it lives quietly in small gestures, in the way he admits his mistake without making excuses, in how he stays when it would be easier to leave, in the way he expresses love even when words feel clumsy. These are moments where his heart chooses truth over protection. He might not always say, "I'm hurting," but you can feel it in the way he grows still when certain memories pass through him. That stillness is not absence, it is presence too full for words. Every man faces the fear of being misunderstood. He fears that if he shows what lies beneath his surface, he might lose respect or control. This fear becomes the invisible prison that keeps him distant. Yet, the moment he dares to be vulnerable, to say, "This is what I feel," even if it's not strong, the chains loosen. Because vulnerability brings freedom. It frees him from the need to always be right, from the pressure to always know what to do, from the exhausting act of pretending that he cannot be hurt. Vulnerability does not make him less masculine, it makes him more whole. True masculinity is not the absence of emotion, it is the integration of it. It is the balance between power and sensitivity, between strength and softness. A man who can weep without shame, love without fear, and admit his weakness without losing his center. that man has discovered real power. Vulnerability refines strength by softening it with humility. It allows him to lead not from dominance, but from understanding. When a man chooses vulnerability, he begins to heal generational wounds. He breaks the silent inheritance passed down through fathers and sons, the unspoken rule that emotions must be buried. He teaches by example that strength can coexist with tenderness, that it is possible to be powerful and gentle at once. His vulnerability becomes permission for others to be real too. It is how emotional evolution begins, one honest heart at a time. Vulnerability also transforms relationships. When he opens up, communication deepens, trust expands, and intimacy becomes sacred. Because love thrives not in perfection but in truth. It is in the moments of shared honesty. When he admits his fears, his insecurities, his confusion, that love becomes alive. For love cannot heal what it cannot see. Vulnerability allows love to enter the hidden corners of the heart, places where no one has looked before. There is also wisdom in his vulnerability. To admit emotion is to acknowledge impermanence, to recognize that everything, even strength, changes with time. Vulnerability teaches acceptance of this change. It softens resistance and opens awareness. It reminds him that his emotions are not enemies, but messengers. Each feeling, whether pain or joy, arrives with something to reveal. By staying open, he receives the lessons life tries to offer through experience itself. And still, vulnerability will always demand courage. It is not something given. It must be chosen every day. To stay open in a world that punishes openness requires inner discipline. It requires the courage to be misunderstood, the patience to be gentle with oneself, the strength to remain soft when life turns hard. This is why vulnerability is the highest form of strength, because it keeps the heart alive in a world that constantly tries to harden it. When a man understands his vulnerability, he stops seeing it as a flaw and begins to see it as his source of connection. He learns that to feel deeply is not to fall apart, but to fall into life itself. He discovers that behind every fear is freedom, behind every tear is truth, behind every trembling moment is awakening. And as he embraces this openness, he becomes not less of a man, but more of a human being, aware, compassionate, and whole. There is a quiet truth about a man that few ever take the time to understand. He does not seek to be adored as much as he longs to be respected. Admiration pleases his ego, but respect nourishes his spirit. One feeds the surface, the other reaches the core. To be admired is to be seen for his achievements. To be respected is to be seen for his essence. A man can live without praise, but he cannot live in a space where he feels disrespected, unseen, or unvalued for what he silently endures each day. From an early age, a man learns that his worth will be measured by what he provides, what he builds, what he conquers. Society tells him that his purpose is to perform, to produce, to prove. But beneath that training lies something deeper, the desire to be valued not only for what he does, but for who he is when he has nothing left to give. Respect is what gives meaning to his struggle. It tells him that his effort is not invisible, that his quiet sacrifices are noticed, that his presence carries weight even when his words do not. Admiration comes easily when things look impressive. People admire strength, success, and confidence, but these are often masks worn to hide fatigue and doubt. Respect, on the other hand, is born from understanding. It is offered not to perfection, but to authenticity. When a man feels respected, he feels safe enough to remove the armor he wears in the outside world. He can finally exhale. Because respect does not demand that he be extraordinary. It honors him for being real. Respect is the language of trust. It tells him, I see your effort even when you fail. I see your intention even when you struggle. A man who feels respected will move mountains for the one who gives it. It ignites his silent motivation, fuels his loyalty, and steadies his heart. He doesn't crave constant validation, he craves quiet recognition. The kind that says, you matter here. You are enough, not because of what you achieve, but because of the integrity you carry. To respect a man is not to fear him or to flatter him. It is to treat his energy with reverence. It is to listen when he speaks, not because he demands authority, but because you value his truth. It is to allow space for his decisions, to trust his judgment, and to believe in his direction. Even when the path is uncertain, respect tells him that his presence brings stability. It gives him the inner permission to lead with confidence rather than control. There is a difference between admiration and respect that often goes unnoticed. Admiration is conditional. It fades when the image changes. Respect is enduring. It stays when life becomes difficult. Admiration says, I like what you do. Respect says, I value who you are. A man who is merely admired feels pressure to keep performing. But a man who is respected feels peace in simply existing. This peace is what strengthens him. It allows him to open his heart without fear of being diminished. When a man feels disrespected, something inside him withdraws. He may not raise his voice, but his silence becomes heavy. It is not pride, it is pain. Disrespect touches the deepest wound in him, the place where he fears he is never enough. When his words are dismissed, his effort overlooked, or his dignity questioned, it cuts deeper than most realize. Because for him, respect is not just an emotion. It is identity. It affirms that his place in the world has meaning, that his role has value, that his presence has weight. Respect also builds the foundation of love. Many relationships fail not from lack of affection, but from lack of respect. Love without respect becomes emotion without direction, warm but unstable. Respect without love is cold discipline, but love with respect becomes balance. When a woman respects a man, she doesn't have to flatter him with constant praise. Her tone, her patience, and her faith in his ability say everything without words. In that space, he thrives. His confidence grows, not because someone feeds his ego, but because he feels trusted in his essence. For a man, respect is the quiet form of love that he understands most clearly. He may not always respond to emotional language, but he feels deeply through actions that communicate trust. When he sees that his opinion is valued, his effort acknowledged, his decision supported, it awakens something sacred within him. He becomes grounded, focused, and protective. Respect transforms his energy from survival to devotion. In every man, there lives a desire to be seen as capable, not for control, but for contribution. He wants to know that his presence adds something meaningful to the space he occupies. Respect tells him that his efforts are not wasted, that what he builds, defends, and provides has significance. It affirms his inner mission, giving purpose to his daily struggle. Without it, he may still act strong, but something in his spirit begins to dim. He loses the fire that drives him to give, to protect, to serve. Respect is not obedience. It is recognition. It is the understanding that strength and sensitivity coexist within him, that his calmness does not mean indifference, that his silence does not mean apathy. To respect him is to allow him the freedom to express in his own way, not forcing him to feel, but giving him space to unfold naturally. It is a silent acknowledgement that his journey has depth, that his challenges are real, and that his restraint is often an act of discipline, not disconnection. The truest form of respect is not spoken but felt. It shows in tone, in patience, in the small details of interaction. It is in not interrupting when he speaks, in trusting his pace, in allowing his leadership without resistance. These gestures speak louder than any words. They tell him that he is valued, that he is trusted, that his energy is recognized. This is the respect that reaches the heart of a man. Quiet, steady, unwavering. A man who is respected stands differently. He breathes deeper, he carries peace in his steps, and his presence becomes calm rather than defensive. He no longer needs to prove himself because he is seen. He no longer hides behind achievements because he is valued beyond them. Respect gives him back his natural strength, not the strength that dominates, but the strength that protects, nurtures, and builds. When respect exists, admiration naturally follows. But when admiration replaces respect, connection begins to fade, because admiration looks up while respect stands beside. Admiration worships an image, but respect honors the soul. And for a man who walks through the world carrying both visible and invisible battles, respect is not just appreciation. It is home. A man's love often moves in silence. It is not always woven through words or dressed in grand romantic gestures. It is quiet, steady, and deeply rooted in presence. Many mistake his calmness for indifference or his few words for emotional distance, but his love rarely speaks in language. It breathes through consistency. He does not need to say, "I love you," 100 times to prove it. Instead, he shows up when it matters most, stands beside you when the world feels uncertain, and remains when everything else begins to fade. His love is not a song, it is a stillness that anchors everything around it. In a world obsessed with expression, we forget that not all hearts communicate through poetry. Some express through being, through showing, through enduring. A man's love is often found in the things he quietly does. The way he listens even when he doesn't fully understand, the way he fixes what breaks without being asked, the way he protects not through words, but through presence. His love may not always sound romantic, but it is dependable, unshockable, and sacred in its simplicity. Presence is his form of devotion. When he loves, he gives his attention, his time, his effort. He may not always articulate his emotions, but he expresses them through responsibility, through being there even when it's inconvenient, through carrying weight that no one sees, through remembering small details that others overlook. His love doesn't seek attention, it seeks impact. His presence says, "You are safe here. You are not alone." Many mistake a man's quietness for emotional distance because they expect love to sound a certain way. But love does not always speak, sometimes it simply stays. When he sits beside you in silence, he is not detached, he is connecting in the way he knows best. His silence is not absence, it is awareness. It is his way of saying, "I'm here, and you don't have to perform for my attention." His calmness provides the grounding that words cannot. To love through presence means to express through action rather than decoration. It is the way he shows up when your world feels heavy, without needing to fix or control, just to be a steady force. It is the way he checks on you without announcing it, the way he stands in front of you when life becomes harsh, and the way he quietly makes space for you to be yourself without judgment. His love is not about dramatics, it is about devotion expressed in simplicity. There is depth in this kind of love, but it takes awareness to see it. The modern heart often wants fireworks, constant affirmation, visible affection, loud reassurance. But his love is more like the earth, stable, grounding, consistent. It doesn't dazzle, it endures. His love teaches patience because it unfolds slowly, not through emotional fireworks, but through patterns of reliability. When he loves, he becomes a quiet guardian, one who holds space, not attention. He loves through presence because words have failed him before. He knows that promises can be broken, that expressions can be hollow, that feelings can be performed without sincerity. So, instead of speaking endlessly, he chooses to show. His actions become his truth. The way he remains loyal in difficulty, the way he provides when life becomes uncertain, the way he chooses peace over pride, all of it is his unspoken language of love. It is not the kind of love that shouts, but the kind that stands. Presence is also his form of listening. When he stays near without trying to solve, when he hears without interrupting, when he allows space for emotion without turning away, he is communicating more love than 1,000 words ever could. His patience is his poem. His stillness is his affection. His quiet attentiveness is the verse that goes unnoticed but carries the deepest meaning. There is humility in the way he loves. He does not need recognition for his effort. He does not perform affection for display. He simply does what love requires, often unseen, often unpraised, but always with intention. When he repairs what is broken, supports what is fragile, or holds you when your strength fades, that is his love speaking. He is not trying to impress, he is trying to protect. For him, love is not about showing the world what he feels. It is about making sure you feel it even when the world isn't watching. His love is not poetic because he doesn't need language to validate it. Words are temporary, presence is eternal. His consistency becomes a poem you live inside, written not with ink, but with time. Every day he chooses to stay, to listen, to understand, to care. That is the verse that never ends. His love exists not in moments of passion, but in patterns of peace. It is found in the way he quietly adapts to your moods, in the way he learns your silence, in the way he protects your softness without ever needing to be told how. To love through presence requires maturity. It means choosing commitment over excitement, substance over display. It means understanding that love is not always about what is said, but about what is done when no one is looking. This kind of love may not look extraordinary to outsiders, but to the one who feels it, it becomes irreplaceable. It is the kind of love that holds everything together when everything else seems to fall apart. When he loves, he gives his time, not leftovers, but priority. He shows up even when he's tired, not because he has to, but because he wants to. He will fix the small things, remember the important things, and protect the fragile things. His presence is his declaration. He does not use elaborate words to prove his love. He proves it through the constancy of being there. His love is not an announcement. It is a rhythm, steady, patient, and sincere. There is also strength in his simplicity. because to be present requires discipline. It requires putting aside distractions, ego, and pride. It means learning to show love not through promise, but through presence. He understands that time is the most sacred thing he can offer, because time is life, and to give it freely is to give himself. So when he stays, listens, supports, and stands beside you even in silence, he is saying, "You matter more than my comfort." His love is not poetry written for the world to read. It is a quiet devotion that unfolds in everyday life, in the way he carries burdens without complaint, in how he builds stability for those he loves, in how he remains consistent when emotions waver. It is the kind of love that doesn't need to be explained, because when he is near, you simply feel it. The peace, the protection, the unspoken promise that he is there fully, completely, without needing words to make it known. There is a silent struggle that lies behind a man's eyes, one that few ever see and even fewer understand. It is the invisible burden of expectation, the constant pressure to be strong, composed, capable, and unbreakable. From a young age, he is taught that his value lies in performance, in what he achieves, provides, and controls. The world whispers to him that to be a man means never to falter, never to show fear, never to need help. And so, he learns to wear strength like armor, even when it cuts into his skin. He carries this weight not because he wants to, but because he believes he must. Expectation surrounds him like an unspoken contract. He must be dependable yet spontaneous, protective yet gentle, confident yet humble. He must earn enough to provide, remain emotionally stable, and handle storms with a smile. Society gives him no room for fragility, no permission for uncertainty, even when the burden grows heavy. He walks with straight shoulders because somewhere deep down he has convinced himself that if he stops, everything will fall apart. This weight is not only external. It seeps into his mind and becomes part of his identity. He starts to measure his worth by how well he holds it all together. When he fails, even slightly, shame follows him like a shadow. He does not show it, but he feels it. The quiet ache of never feeling enough. The pressure to always deliver becomes his silent companion. And so, he fights his battles in solitude because vulnerability has been mistaken for weakness, and asking for help feels like betrayal to the image he has been told to uphold. When he wakes each morning, he steps into a role before he even takes a breath. He becomes the provider, the protector, the problem solver, the one who must not waver. Every responsibility weighs on his chest like invisible armor. It gives him shape but also limits his ability to breathe. He cannot easily say, "I'm tired," because he fears that others depend on his strength to stay standing. He cannot easily admit, "I don't know," because uncertainty feels like failure. So he keeps moving, carrying what most will never see. There are moments when he longs to set the armor down, to be seen not as a role, but as a person. To have someone look at him and say, "You don't have to be strong right now." But these moments are rare because the world rarely gives space for a man to crumble. He is expected to understand everyone else's emotions while concealing his own. When others cry, he comforts. When he wants to cry, he hides. This is the quiet paradox of his existence. He must carry the world, but he must never show that it is heavy. Behind his calmness, there are storms that no one hears. Behind his smile, there are battles between who he truly is and who he feels he must be. Sometimes he sits in silence, not because he has nothing to say, but because he is exhausted from the constant performance of stability. His silence is not emptiness, it is weight. It is the echo of responsibility pressing against his soul. He battles expectation not only in his duties, but also in love. He is told that he must always lead, always protect, always be emotionally composed. When he falters, he fears losing respect. When he struggles, he fears becoming a burden. And so, he loves through doing, through fixing, providing, showing up. Even when inside, he yearns for someone to understand the effort it takes to keep doing so. The world sees his actions, but rarely the fatigue behind them. They see his strength, but not the trembling it takes to maintain it. He is often alone, even when surrounded by people. Alone not because he lacks company, but because no one truly sees the weight he carries. His silence becomes his companion, his thoughts his only witness. He does not complain because he knows the world is listening for solutions, not struggles. So he builds quiet endurance. He learns to smile through pain, to work through exhaustion, to give through depletion. And in this repetition, he forgets what it feels like to rest. Expectation becomes a constant voice in his mind, telling him to do more, be more, give more. It tells him that if he stops, he loses worth, that his value is conditional upon productivity. This is the invisible pressure that keeps him awake at night, not fear of failure, but fear of being seen as inadequate. He pushes forward not only for himself, but for those who depend on him, even when his soul aches for a moment of release. Sometimes, he wishes someone would notice without him having to explain, that someone would look past his strength and see the quiet fatigue underneath. But the world rarely looks that deep. It praises his endurance but forgets his humanity. It applauds his success but ignores the sacrifices buried within it. And so, he keeps his battles private, holding pain like a secret, not because he wants to, but because he feels he must protect others from the burden of his truth. Expectation molds him, but it also isolates him. It teaches him to perform strength instead of experience it. It keeps him from showing weakness, even though weakness is what makes him human. Inside, there is a longing to be seen without the need to impress, to be loved without the demand to perform. He wants to be told that he is enough, even when he is not achieving, even when he is not fixing, even when he is not holding everything together. He battles the weight of expectation with discipline, endurance, and silence. Every challenge becomes a test of his ability to maintain composure. Every setback becomes a reason to work harder. But even warriors grow weary. His strength is not infinite. It is chosen, renewed daily through sheer will. He doesn't want to be worshipped for his power. He wants to be understood for his persistence. When he walks through life carrying invisible burdens, he does not seek pity. He seeks recognition, not for his achievements, but for his effort. He wants to know that someone sees how much he gives, how much he holds back, how much he carries quietly. For him, strength has never been about showing no pain. It has been about moving forward in spite of it. He continues his battle not for glory, but for peace. The peace that comes from knowing that even if the world does not see the weight he bears, he still carries it with integrity. He does not ask for applause. He only asks for understanding, the kind that looks beyond the surface into the silent endurance that defines him. For in every man who seems unshakable, there exists a soul quietly battling the weight of expectation alone. There is a side of a man that the world rarely sees, the side that longs not for admiration, not for power, not even for validation, but for connection. Beneath the layers of composure and control, behind the armor of logic and restraint, there exists a heart that simply wants to feel seen without being judged, understood without having to explain, accepted without the need to perform. Connection, for him, is not a luxury. It is a quiet prayer whispered from the depths of his being. It is what reminds him that he is not alone in a world that constantly asks him to stand apart. He has been taught that strength means self-sufficiency, that real men do not need anyone, that emotions are distractions. Yet somewhere within him, he knows this is not true. Because even when he appears stoic and steady, there is a silent ache that only genuine connection can soothe. He does not crave crowds or noise. He craves presence. The kind that feels like stillness shared between souls. The kind where words are few, but understanding runs deep. His prayer is not spoken aloud. It lives in the spaces between sentences, in the way his eyes soften when he feels seen, in the rare moments when he allows his guard to fall. Connection is how he breathes through the noise of expectation. It is how he remembers that he is human beneath all the roles he plays. In connection, he does not have to prove, perform, or protect. He can simply be. That simplicity is sacred to him because it is so rare. The world expects him to constantly do, to act, to fix, to lead. But connection invites him to stop, to just exist, to feel, to share. It is the only place where he can rest without being questioned. When a man truly connects, it is not through grand speeches or declarations. It is through quiet presence, through the small ways he shows he cares, the way he listens without interruption, the way he notices without making it obvious, the way he stays even when things grow uncomfortable. His love language is not always verbal. It is energy, attention, consistency. When he gives you his time, it is not casual, it is sacred. Because time is the one thing he guards most carefully, and when he shares it, he is offering a piece of himself. His connection is not loud because he has learned that real closeness doesn't require performance. He doesn't need to constantly express to prove that he feels. He expresses through being there, through remembering the smallest details, through protecting in peace instead of feeding conflict, through creating silence that feels safe instead of empty. Connection for him is not about constant conversation. It is about shared stillness, where both people can sit in silence and still feel together. Yet for many men, connection is not easily given. It is something they must unlearn to fear. He has been conditioned to believe that needing others is weakness, that emotion must be controlled, that softness makes him vulnerable to pain. So he hides his need for connection behind humor, work, or solitude. But the longing remains quiet and steady. Like a prayer, he doesn't dare speak aloud. When he finds someone who listens without trying to fix, who sees beyond his calmness into the turbulence within, something deep inside him begins to unfold. He starts to trust that connection does not have to take from him. It can also give. For him, connection is not about attention. It is about energy alignment. He is drawn to those who make him feel at ease, where silence does not need to be filled, where presence alone communicates safety. In such spaces, his guard lowers naturally. He doesn't have to hide behind logic. He can feel. He can breathe. This is what he secretly prays for. Not perfection, not constant excitement, but peace shared with another soul who understands that love is not always loud. Connection softens him. It brings him back to himself. When he feels truly connected, he remembers that he is more than his duties, more than his performance, more than his control. He begins to speak not from defense but from truth. He begins to listen, not to fix, but to understand. In connection, he is reminded that vulnerability is not defeat, it is depth. It is the point where strength and softness meet. When he withdraws, it is not always rejection. Sometimes it is reflection. He retreats to make sense of his feelings, to protect what is sacred inside him. But when someone patiently holds space for his silence without demanding explanation, he begins to trust again. That patience is what allows him to unfold. He opens slowly, like a sunrise that takes its time. Forcing him only builds walls, understanding him dissolves them. He connects not through demand but through peace. He prays for connection because it restores what life takes from him. Every day he faces pressure to lead, to decide, to endure. He holds emotions he never names, fears he never shares, doubts he never reveals. Connection becomes his sanctuary, the place where he can finally exhale. When someone meets him there with openness and respect, he feels seen, not for what he achieves, but for what he feels beneath the surface. That recognition heals him more deeply than words ever could. In connection, he learns balance. He realizes that strength does not mean isolation. It means allowing others to walk beside him. It means understanding that interdependence does not diminish his power. It deepens it. The bond that forms through genuine connection is not control, but harmony. It is two energies choosing peace instead of performance, truth instead of illusion. For him, that harmony is sacred. It becomes his grounding force, his quiet faith in something real amidst the noise of the world. Connection is also his silent form of gratitude. He does not always say thank you aloud, but he shows it through small, consistent acts, through staying close even when words fail, through providing even when unasked, through protecting what he values without needing recognition. His prayer for connection is answered not through conversation, but through shared presence. It is in the simple act of being understood without needing to speak that he finds peace. For a man, connection is not about possession, it is about resonance. It is the meeting of souls that speak the same unspoken language. It is the quiet recognition that someone sees the truth beneath his stillness. When he feels that connection, it becomes his prayer, the one he carries silently, the one that asks not for perfection, but for peace, not for performance, but for presence, not for admiration, but for understanding. Because in that sacred connection, he finds something beyond words, a reflection of his true self at last seen and finally safe